So hello students. So today we'll start with the first topic of Unit 1, which is features of construction, construction projects, types and features. And our Unit 1 is named as Basics of Construction, Construction Method Basics and Construction Equipment Basics. So regarding this topic, I have already shown you a few videos. So now we'll go through the lecture. So basics of construction, the unique features of construction. So every construction in India has certain unique features, and here I have cited three of them. The first one is each structure is unique, second is each structure is commissioned, and third is each structure is built in situ. In situ means on the site. So on explanation of the 3 points, the first one, each structure is unique. So even if the structures are similar, there is possibility of variation due to the influence of availability of material and labor, type of substratum, atmospheric condition, natural condition. Number two, each structure is commissioned. Civil engineering works are not like factory products which may be available in a stock at a required time. So each civil engineering work is commissioned, that is, order is placed for each structure before construction work commences. However, nowadays, construction components are prefabricated, which can be kept in start. Construction engineering companies never initiate themselves. Thus, decisions of construction of various projects are taken by taking into consideration their requirements, etc. Hence, the civil engineering industries are the masters of its own. Number three, each structure is built in situ, that is on site. The civil engineering structure is built at a place of its final use. Sometimes components may be fabricated or built elsewhere. However, structure has to suit the particular requirements of the site where it is built. These 3 points are very important from your exam point of view. Next topic is construction projects. A project is a series of related tasks which, when they are carried in the correct order, will lead to the completion of the project. Projects are temporary and generally resulting in the creation of a tangible product or outcome or result. This is as opposed to a program, which is a series of interrelated projects that may be carried out repeatedly or continuously in order to support an ongoing process. A construction project, sometimes just referred to as a project, is the organized process of constructing, renovating, refurbishing, etc. a building, structure, or infrastructure. The project process typically starts with an overarching requirement which is developed through the creation of a brief, feasibility studies, option studies, design, financing, and construction. Construction projects are typically one-off. That is, it is a one project team, brief and financing. And this project team, the briefing and the financing are put together in order to produce a unique design that delivers a single project. So once the project is completed, the team is disbanded or dissolved and sometimes will not work together again. So this can make it difficult to develop ideas or relationships, and so lessons learned are more often not carried forward to the next project. The exceptions to this are repeat developers such as supermarket chains, house builders, and so on. Typically, a construction project comprises many smaller projects which require a wide range of different disciplines working in collaboration. Large numbers of people are involved on a typical construction project, with the structure and composition of the project team usually changing through its duration. Projects may be coordinated by a project manager or by a lead consultant who is supported by professionals such as an architect, engineer, cost consultant, and so on. This separation of project roles into different disciplines and contractual arrangements that further separate the client, consultants, contractors, and subcontractors can make construction projects advisable. This can result in conflict, opposition, confrontation, dispute, and even hostility. Types of construction projects. First one, residential. These projects include townhouses, houses, condominiums, apartments, cottages, subdivisions, and single unit dwellings. The designs are usually made by engineers and architects, and constructions are executed by the builders. Number two, building. Constructing buildings is the most common type of a project. It's a process of adding structures to properties. Most projects are small renovations or room additions. Most new building projects involve construction of sheltered enclosures with access for housing people, machinery, equipment, and supplies. It also includes installation of equipment and utilities. Number three, commercial and institutional. These buildings include a whole lot of project sizes and types. Basically, hospitals, clinics, schools, universities, stadiums, sports facilities, shopping centers, retail stores, warehouses, manufacturing plants, etc. Special engineers and architects are usually hired for the construction of this building. There are a very few competitors in this segment since it costs a lot of money and requires a greater sophistication in terms of commercial and institutional buildings when compared with residential projects. Next, industrial. This is just a small part of the construction industry, but it is a very important part nonetheless. The projects are usually owned by large industrial corporations like medicine, power generation, manufacturing, petroleum, etc. Next, highway. This involves alteration, repair, and construction of roads, streets, alleys, highways, runways, paths, etc. It also includes incidental construction. The last one is heavy. These projects tend to involve projects which aren't classified properly as buildings or highways. Some examples include dams, sewer line projects, sewage treatment facilities, dredging projects, flood control projects, water treatment plants, etc. These are some of the most popular types of construction today. Next topic is features of construction projects. It is a very important topic. So first one is the project should have a specified target. Number two, project should be unique and cannot be replicated or copied with the same task and resources giving the same results. The construction project should satisfy the owner's requirement and expectations from the project. The construction project should not be a routine work, although there are some aspects that are routine. The construction project should also consist of a number of associated activities contributing to the project as a whole. The time limit for completion of project shall be defined. The construction project is complex and it involves a number of individuals from different departments, so right coordination shall be set up within the departments. The project manager must be flexible to accommodate any change that might occur during the project. There are factors of uncertainty such as the performance of individuals, how their skills adapt to unfamiliar work, and the other unknown external influences. The total cost of construction project shall be defined and the project shall be completed within the given budget. The project should also provide unique opportunities to acquire new skills. The project gives impetus or importance to the project manager to adapt to working under changing circumstances as the nature of the project is changed. There are risks with each step of the project and the project manager should manage those risks to reach the project goal. So that's all for this lecture. We'll go through 2-3 more videos related to the topic. You can now give your attendance in the chat box with your name and enrollment number. Thank you.
On principles of construction management. Now, in the last discussion that we had gone through the stages in a project comprising of the concept, which would essentially also have a requirement. That means there is already a requirement and the client knows the tentative location of that project. A basic survey has been carried out to address the applicable bylaws, constraints, soil conditions, and so on. So if these things have been carried out at the concept stage itself, it makes things a lot easier as far as the project is concerned. So from the concept, we move to a more detailed plan, followed by structural and other design steps. These design steps are followed by an execution phase where a contractor or another agency actually carries out that project, followed by the operation of that project, during which we are mostly concerned with the maintenance and operation of that, and finally the decommissioning. So as far as this particular course is concerned, I've already emphasized that we are primarily dealing with these aspects, from concept to planning to design and execution. More specifically, we will deal with design and execution as we go along. Now, before we get into that discussion, in this lecture today, we will go through some of the major steps in the execution of a project and also cover some of the basic definitions that we will use as we go along in this course. Now, coming to the first step, which is the concept. From there, we move on to the preliminary estimate of the project. This exercise the client or the owner carries out to have some understanding of how much, as a ballpark figure, how much would the project cost, whether it's going to cost 1 million or 10 million or 100 million and so on. We must remember that we are not dealing with individual finances. We are dealing with institutional finances, which require approvals, which require the proper kind of paperwork, which has to be supporting a particular expenditure. So here is a preliminary estimate, which need not be very accurate, but if it is accurate, it's good, but it need not be very accurate. Please also remember that even to prepare a preliminary estimate, the client has to invest a certain amount of manpower. There is a certain amount of investment in terms of manpower, in terms of resources to prepare the preliminary estimate. And that is what we talked about earlier in this discussion today. That is the investment that is required to do the very rough layout plan, figure out the need, and so on. So once the preliminary estimate is ready, we take an administrative approval and financial sanction. So we go to whatever the authority or the body be, that okay, this is the project that we would like to execute, kindly approve this project. So depending on the kind of discussion that happens at that stage, the project is, let's say, approved. Now, once that approval is obtained, additional investment is carried out by the client in more detailed planning and more detailed design, which could include the structural design, the functional design, good for construction drawings, and so on and so forth. We've not covered, or we don't really need to go into the details as to whether an architect will be involved or an architect will not be involved, as to which is the agency which will actually carry out the preliminary estimate or the detailed estimate and so on. Leaving those things apart, once we have the detailed design, we go ahead and calculate or carry out the detailed estimate. That gives us the actual amount of funds that are likely to be involved as far as the construction of that project is concerned. Then we go back and obtain a final approval and technical sanction. Please remember that it's a matter of terminology. We are calling it financial sanction here, we are calling it technical sanction here, we are calling it a final approval here, we are calling it an administrative approval here, and so on. But those are matters of detail, and we really don't have to bother so much about what terminology is used and so on. The idea basically is that initially there is a preliminary estimate, then there is a detailed estimate, and before we go to the site, we need to have a final approval from someone who says, yes, we can go ahead and execute the project. Till such time as we have reached this stage, the project is still on the drawing board alone. This does not mean that all the details of the project have been worked out before the execution starts. There may be some details which are left out, but the detailing should have already reached a stage wherein a very accurate estimate can still be made. So having come this far, we finally go to the stage where we try to say, okay, now let's try to look for an agency to execute the job. And this exercise is carried out through what is called, or what I've called here, a notice inviting tender, an NIT. Now, before we proceed further, I would like to make some comments. One of them is that we must remember that these procedures have been designed or they are being discussed because we need to have transparency in processes to make sure that the funds are being used appropriately and effectively. Like I said at the beginning of the discussion today, we are dealing with institutional funds. If it's a government project, we are dealing with public funds. So there is an accountability and there's a responsibility which is very important, and the processes have to ensure transparency. The procedures should also be such that the responsibility and accountability can be appropriately fixed at even a subsequent point in time. What this means is that even after the project has been executed, should there be a doubt as to whether the right kind of procedures were followed or not, there should be a trail of documents, approvals, and so on, which would be able to establish as to what were the different steps that were taken. I must also share with you the fact that the details being discussed in these lectures are by nature of a general discussion, and different organizations could have their own specific procedures and their terminologies. At times, the discussion here could be largely theoretical to the extent that it is not really practiced in the industry. We'll talk of processes which could be ideal. We may allude to them in that form or not, but we must remember that it's not a single process which is practiced across the construction industry. Different organizations, whether it's the railways or whether it's the roads, they have their own processes. Different countries have their own processes by which these projects are executed. Now, having said that, let's look at a few simple definitions. What exactly is a tender in the construction industry? This really is a written offer to execute a specified work within a certain time, under certain conditions of contract between the contractor and the client for a certain amount of money. So we have a client and we have a contractor, and what binds them together is a contract. And this contract basically says that the contractor agrees to create a certain service or a certain structure or whatever it is, and the client agrees to compensate the contractor with a certain amount of money. So now this pair is what is given in the contract. So the tender is basically a written document, which is not a contract, of course. It is a written statement submitted by the bidder as such, saying that, okay, for this work, under these conditions, this is what it's going to cost. So we'll see these details more closely later on. Now let's try to look at what is a notice inviting tender. As we saw in a previous slide, this is the stage when the client is ready to go public with an announcement that, well, this is a project which we would like to see executed. So a notice inviting tender is a public document announcing a work and inviting interested parties to submit their bids. The details of the conditions of the work are also either indicated or the method of obtaining them is given. So this is where we really need to have completed all our detailed design and everything, so that any interested bidder can either look at that document, or there is a place, it could be a website, it could be a link or whatever it is, he could go there and obtain the details of the work and the conditions under which it has to be carried out. Then, depending upon the scale or the estimated cost, the level of circulation could be different. Now, what this means is that depending on the estimated cost of the tender or estimated cost of the work, and that estimated cost is not the preliminary estimate, it is basically based on the detailed estimate. That is the final estimate that we worked out at the end of our planning and design exercise. Based on that cost, what should be the level of circulation? The level of circulation means that whether we should publish it locally at the client's website and leave it at that, or we should make extra efforts to publicize the fact that there is a work available. The lowest form of execution is word of mouth. We just inform some people and let it be. The most public form of circulation is a global tender, where we try to invite people from across the world to bid for a project. We must remember that circulation also involves funds. And therefore, one has to decide that, okay, for a 1 million project, this is the level of circulation that we will do. For a 10 million project, this is what we will do. And for 100 million, this is what we'll do, and so on. So that is where different departments, different institutions, different organizations may have their own standards and methods of circulation. Now, what does the notice inviting tender or the NIT contain? It contains the name of the client inviting tender. It also contains pre-qualifications, if any. It might say that, well, for this job, we are looking for a contractor who's already registered with us. So there is a procedure by which different organizations have pre-registered contractors, and we have to declare that in this. What is the nature of the work? Whether it primarily involves construction of a house, or it involves primarily civil work or electrical work or whatever it is. What is the estimated cost? What is the likely or the desired time of completion? What are the conditions while undertaking the contract or the job? This typically is given in 2 volumes. One is a general conditions of contract, which is called the GCC, and the other is the special conditions of contract, which is the SCC. Then there are details of the earnest money deposit, the EMD, and the details of the security deposit and the performance guarantee. It also contains the last date, in fact, specifically the time for submission of a tender document. And finally, it gives the date, time, and place for opening of the tender. Once we look at these